Okay, so it's probably going to go. This meeting is being live streamed. Yes. All right. I'm sure that we are probably live at this point.
We are.
Okay, good. Excellent. Hey, Natasha. Okay, so
Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm getting a little feedback here. I got to fix that. There we go.
Here, yeah.
Now I got to find you again. There she is. Hi, everybody. This is This is Annalisa with Journey to the Goddess TV, where I regenerate ancient feminine wisdom for modern women. And
And I am Natasha Thomas. I'm with the Nadoma Center. I'm a writer, a goddess enthusiast. So I'm happy to be here. And I'm also part of Everyday Goddess, which is an initiative that Annalisa and I started to discuss all things goddess, all things divine feminine. And we talk about spirituality and how we can infuse goddess wisdom, goddess tradition into our everyday interactions, our everyday lives. So excited to be here as always.
yes, me too. And I when we were discussing the theme for this week, I was like, I really like to discuss the topic of queen, especially queen versus princess archetype, because I see women always talking about, I'm claiming my queendom, or and I'm like, what? And I was like, but what does that actually mean? Like for me, like I don't even know what that means, but I can feel the difference in my body. So I'm really excited to talk about this today. And I got totally inspired, and I was like, if we're going to talk about this, I have to dress up in a way that makes me feel like a queen. So I've got my full flamenco outfit on. Yeah, thanks. And makeup. It was like red it is.
So let's start there. So for you, that's a part of like claiming that queendom, right? It's like I need to feel good
Yeah.
about what I'm wearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of discovered that in the last 30 minutes. I mean, you know, generally like I like to wear, like I feel like my clothes, probably for a lot of people, like my clothes are an expression of who I am and how I'm feeling. And I was like, queen is a really big energy. That is like really powerful. And I don't want to wear something that's super cute or super, I need, if I'm going to talk about it and really feel it, then I need to clothes. I mean, as an actress anyway, it's like clothes really help me embody a character. So yeah, for me, this is like, that's how I get in.
Yeah. I would say same. I think it's an energy. And yeah, I think when I'm wearing stuff that I feel truly expresses who I am, whatever that is at any given point, because that can change. When I really feel like these clothes are speaking about who I am, it's sending. Then I feel good. I feel powerful. And then there are moments where that isn't the case, right? Where I may just throw on something to run out, but I feel different when I do that, right? I do feel like, okay, I want to get back to the house, right? I don't want too many people to see me. But yeah, not necessarily that clothes make you, but I think whenever we're wearing something that we feel really good in, then it's easier to tap into that kind of queen energy,
Totally. I
empowered energy.
totally, totally. Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, it's like I feel different when I'm wearing yoga clothes versus like when I wear clothes to go out, to a nice restaurant or to, I don't know, a club or whatever. Those are all help you embody these different like energies you want to play with. But then I was also thinking, I was like, but what, I wonder, like with Queen, if it's like, if you are totally embodied in that energy of Queen, if you can feel that in any scenario, if you're like, I am a queen when I'm in yoga class doing my asana, and I am a queen when I'm sitting in that, boardroom or wherever.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it's more of just this empowered. Okay, yeah, because I think we should probably back up. Because I know we talk about goddess a lot.
Yeah.
And for me, the goddess energy is slightly different than a queen energy. And the queen is more embodied. It's a more of I don't know, goddess for me is something that's a little bit more ethereal. It's a little bit more intangible. Whereas I feel like goddess for me is very, very embodied. It's very much like that is the, but it's a the regality of it. It's just and what I really want to emphasize about queen and king, especially coming from like social justice movements, is we have this idea of like king or queen that's about like ruling over others, right? Or this idea of like as a queen, that means everybody else is less than, right? And so for me, queendom or kingdom is a personal, it's personal, like we each embody that, right? So it's never about hierarchies. It's never about this idea of one person being better than another. It's about this idea of like your life. You're the main character. You're the starring role in your own life, right? And what does that look like? What does that empowered um, main character energy look like? And that's queendom for me. And
Yeah.
yes, so it's anywhere, in yoga pants, at the grocery store, in a meeting, cleaning up the house. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like this idea of queendom or kingdom. Like, that's interesting. Like, oh, maybe you can like action verb, queen and king. It's an action as much as it is like a kind of type of person, or a quality. Um, I got myself off track there. I'm having one of those days where I'm just like my mind is like so excited about talking about this subject. Um, yeah, but I like how you were talking about empower, like, queen is someone who's very empowered. And I like the idea of queendom as being kind of this non-hierarchical kind of energy, which I was kind of thinking about too, like, especially in this difference between princess and queen, like, because queen feels to me like you're very self-possessed, but you're also like, you kind of like understand the complexity of the world around you, like within yourself and the world around you. So you're always like, you know how to show up, how to be kind of compassionate, but also direct, also discerning. It's like, it feels like queendom when it's like not the shadow queen, but like, like light queen or positive queen, I guess. Um, it feels very much like the totality of all the goddesses in a way, because she, like, queen would like really embody us, all of like these really empowered qualities of just, being really strong and centered, discerning, compassionate, loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, it's really good to refer back to the spiritual definition of king or queen, because technically a king or a queen was supposed to represent God's representative on earth. It's supposedly the model is, there's God, and then God, the king or queen is directly in relationship to God, and therefore is able to be a wise spiritual leader because it's taking its mandate from like a spiritual source, right? So that's kind of the and that's how like kings and queens historically were chosen to rule, that this idea they have this direct connection. And so if we use that model just on a personal, because of course that model was definitely flawed in our political systems, right? When we think about kings or queens and how they ruled. But if we think about it on a personal spiritual level, right, it's this idea of I can show up in the world as this kind of empowered and spiritual and compassionate leader because I'm taking my orders from, a higher power, whatever it is, right? So it's this idea of like the power is channeled through you.
Yeah.
That's how it was supposed to be with the king or queen. The power is channeled through you to be able to rule the land,
Mm-hmm.
with benevolence. And so, but and I think for me personally, that is my relationship to my queen. It's this idea that I am responsible for, this piece of earth that I'm standing on in my home. And so, in order for me to show up in the ways that I want to, it does require me to, I rely on like the spiritual forces in my life to guide me. I listen, I pray, I meditate, and I do all these things to try to, to make sure like that my decisions are guided by love, by source, and so and I think of that queendom as a responsibility, like a responsibility to the people around me, in my home, right? In my home, there are children, there are animals, there are plants. And so it's like my queendom is also that, right? Like, how do I take care? There's a responsibility in queendom to me too, of stewardship. How do
Yeah.
I take care of the things and the people and the relationships around me?
Yeah, I love that word stewardship and responsibility. That feels really good to me in relationship to queendom and kingdom. But we're focusing on queendom. Um, yeah, I feel, you know, again, because I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this so much for myself in my life, that my experience today, especially getting ready for our talk, it feels like queendom for me is very much related to like my body and being like fully comfortable and confident in my body and expressing my feelings, expressing my sensuality, my power through my body. Um, yeah. So I think that feels like a big revelation for me right now. Yeah.
So in talking about queendom, what are some archetypes, some, whether they're goddesses or actual figures that you feel like embody kind of that the queen energy when you think of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I was thinking today a little bit about the uh, what's her name? The Virgin Queen. What's her name? Queen Elizabeth? Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah.
I don't know much about, English royalty history, but just this idea of like a queen who is in a position, a very tenuous position of power where everyone around her wants her probably to fail. And she makes the choice, not to get married so that, so that her position isn't compromised. Um, and the strategy behind that and the like, I, and the decisiveness behind that feels very queenly in a way. That as like as far as historical figures, that's what comes to mind. One of my favorite goddesses, Inanna, she's like, her title is Queen of Heaven and Earth, and talk about like, kings. Like it was her relationship with the king, right, in Mesopotamia that like solidified his rule to power. Um, and oh, I'm having a revelation right now. And she's like, the goddess of sensuality and eroticism and being like, fully self-possessed. And she has this myth where she says in the beginning of the myth, she's like, wow, look at my wondrous vulva. She is so in her, sexual, sensual power as a queen of heaven and earth. And she has there's a lot more to her than that, because she's also a goddess of war, and on the battlefield she can like, you know, kill anything and anyone. So yeah, those are my examples that come to mind for me. How about yourself?
I draw on examples from like mythology, but also like pop culture. Like, I think about like growing up, who I saw as like a queen. So I think um, like thinking of Queen Nefertiti was always kind of like an empowering, because I grew up particularly thinking about like I'm a product of 90s hip hop, golden era hip hop, and it was common to have like a gold chain with like the bust of Queen Nefertiti and her like I forget what you call like the crowns there was a name for like the actual Kemetic Egyptian crowns, but for me that was like really empowering, and I associated that with like this kind of politicized hip hop kind of movement. So Queen Nefertiti. I don't, Isis is not necessarily Aset, is not necessarily considered a queen, but I think in terms of like mythologically, she embodies like all of the things that I would think of as a queen in terms of she embodies like compassion and mothering and nurturing, but also this kind of empowered action, like what happened to Osiris, and she decided to go find his body. So that's kind of like that's queen energy to me. That's this idea of like I'm going to take action, right? This is all under my stewardship. Um, so those are queen energies. And I mean, I think of somebody like, again, going back to like 90s hip hop reference, Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah for me embodied like kind of this modern day, like in her video, she wore her crown. But even without the crown, it was just kind of what she represented in the music. So for me, Queen is just kind of that empowered energy. And you know, when I think about tarot, I do tarot readings. Um, and so in tarot, there are four queens for each suit. There's different suits in tarot. There's cups and wands and cups, wands, pentacles, and swords, right? And they all represent these different elements. There's thought and passion and emotion and material abundance. And so those are all queens of those different realms. And then there's the Empress in tarot. And tarot and Empress is the embodiment of all four queens, right? It's this idea of like when you bring all those things together, your heart, your mind, your material world, your inspiration, your passion, right? Then you're this kind of like super queen, which is when like all those elements are in balance. And so for me, that is kind of like, you know, I kind of use that Empress archetype as a gauge in sense of like, all right, how am I doing? You know, where am I imbalanced? Right? Am I having some imbalances in my emotional life? Are my finances out of whack? Are my, you know, my material life? But just this idea of like, I want all of those elements to kind of, you know, be balanced. And I think that that's like the healthy expression of queendom that I strive for. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's a great example. Again, as you were talking, and I loved that you brought pop culture into it. I was like, duh, of course, there have to be so many women in the pop culture sphere that embody this quality, right? And like Beyonce popped into my mind, and she gets called queen all the time. So that's an obvious one. But she is, there's something like really like so powerfully like regal about her. But not in like a weird snobby removed way, but it's like she knows how to give and she knows how to conceal. She like knows the right balance. um and like yeah, and she's just seems like from the outside looking in like a woman that really has all those pieces balanced together.
Yeah. And I think for me, you know, when I think of Beyonce, her music aside, because I think whether you're a fan, you know, we all have different genres of music that we like. Some people may or may not like her music, but I feel like what she really embodies is just this, I mean, all the things you stated, but just I really appreciate there's an obvious work ethic. And I always appreciate that. For me, that's a queendom too, right? Again, because it's that stewardship of like I have a responsibility to work, you know, to work for what I want, to like, you know, I mean, because I've seen like behind the scene footage, and she's like managing like all these different pieces that, you know, other people might outsource, right? Or like, but it's just this idea of like, you can tell there's a deep sense of responsibility for what she puts out. She feels that responsibility, and I think for me that is queendom. Is like you are, you know, my father-in-law used to have the saying that it was like, what did he say? It was like it may not be your fault, but it's still your ass. And for me, that was always kind of a reminder that like the things that I have my name attached to, right? Like if ultimately I want them to be quality, right? And I want them to speak to me. And if for some reason they don't, then that's kind of like maybe where I've dropped the ball, you know, maybe giving something to someone to do who should have done that. But this idea of like, of quality in your work and quality in your life. And I think that that's kind of what, you know, Beyonce embodies to me, that the things that she puts out, she's really diligent about making sure that they are like quality, you know, things aside from whether you like the actual genre of music that she
Right.
that she puts out. And I think that another element of her that embodies queendom that you spoke to is that you know, I admire women who do not respond to things that it doesn't benefit them to respond to. And what I mean by that is like, you know, people have their critiques, some of them are valid, some of them are not. But I think sometimes, you know, you can easily be in that position and feel like you have to explain yourself or prove yourself, or if someone makes up something that's not true about you, that you have to dispel it. And I really appreciate the kind of energy. It's the kind of energy I try to embody, where it's like if that's not something that I want to acknowledge, I won't. And I think Beyonce does that very well. She does not, she doesn't acknowledge shots taken at her. She doesn't even take the time to just. It's almost like it's beneath. I
Yeah.
think I think it's beneath a queen um, to be sucked into someone else's drama. And I think
Right.
that's an example of queendom too, that somebody can come and bring whatever, energy they may want to bring, negative energy, but then you have the choice, the empowered choice about whether you even want to acknowledge that or give that life or energy. And I think she does that very well. Like, she never responds. She never responds. It's like that's an empowered stance for a woman.
Mm-hmm.
First, we're taught to respond to everything, and but then how often we feel like we have to defend or prove ourselves, and we don't. We don't have to.
Right. She is a great model for that, for sure. So I'm curious, like, what about shadow queen qualities? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think shadow queen qualities come with the shadow power, right? Because a queen, when we think of queen, it's an empowered stance, and I think for me, when I think of power, it's always personal power. There's never a desire for me to rule over anyone else. So I think for me, I associate that desire with like shadow queen, right? This idea of like I'm the boss and I rule over everyone and I make decisions for everyone. Yeah, just kind of like a tyrannical dictator type ruler.
Yeah.
I think of shadow queen. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. And I'm also like thinking about like Vic. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to say this in a way that like, feeling like a victim in a situation, and then like acting out of that place. Like, I'm not talking about people who are actually like victimized, but
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? When that's, and yeah, I don't know how to say it in a way that's
power,
not,
maybe
hmm?
disempowered stance, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably a better word for it. Yeah, when you're feeling disempowered and then you act from that place in a way that can be like tyrannical, or that can, potentially keep you disempowered, depending on what those actions are.
Yeah.
um yeah, but yeah, i yeah, anything that's kind of tyrannical or mm, kind just unexpressed, and yeah, any kind of that murky underworld place that feels like shadowy, regal queenie qualities.
Yeah, I definitely think disempowered. I think entitled is another word that I might throw out as like a shadow energy, right? This
Oh
idea,
yeah.
yeah, entitled, feeling like I should have access to any and everything that I want, whether it belongs to someone else or not, just that entitled. Um, yeah. And I guess too, the kind of moving into how we tap into that in an everyday way. So you spoke about just, the idea of like getting dressed in a certain kind of way. But for people who are watching, I guess what are some tips or some things that you may do to encourage people to tap into that inner queen?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. Again, I would definitely say, for me, putting on clothes or, makeup was part of my outfit today. So that has helped me really embody that energy. Um, I feel like for me, it would also, in which I could suggest to other people, like, I think I might fall into some of those shadowy kind of behaviors if I'm not clear about, um, like what I want or some decisions that I need to make. If I'm being kind of like people pleasing or wishy washy, those might lead me down a shadow queen path. So I think what would be good, to counter that would be to do like either some journaling or a meditation and just kind of maybe let's go to the example of journaling, for example, just kind of write out in a particular situation, like how I'm feeling about it, what I want out of it, how I could feel disempowered, how I could feel empowered. Um, I think that would be for me, at least, because I'm, you know, we talk about this like it's super cerebral. So I need to get the thoughts out of my head and see them on paper in order to, um, yeah, to clear out the head and feel empowered.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think it's easiest to slip into some of those shadow aspects with people that you actually have, relationships with that allow you to make decisions for them. So, for example, with children, right? Like with children, I think it's very important for me as a parent to be mindful of the ways that I can slip into kind of those very authoritarian ways
Mm,
that we've been, so like I'm always, and obviously my children rely on me to make decisions that, they may or may not be able to make given their age. But I always want to make sure that I am first doing so from a place that recognizes like their autonomy, their agency, whatever age they are. And then that also encourages them to step into their own personal power, their own queendom and kingdom. And so, but I think that that's where it's most likely to show up because that's the area where I think we give people kind of permission to, unfortunately, like over children, like, right, we give people permission to exert this kind of authority and this kind of, um,
mm-hmm.
and so it's like I want to always make sure that, yes, I have like a responsibility to my children to care for them, but that I'm not exerting this kind of authoritarian uh, queendom or kind of parental model that robs them of their own queendom and kingdom as they're developing it. So that's something that I try to watch out for. Um, but for me, a lot of times it comes from listen. I can listen to music. There are times where particularly if I'm stepping into a situation where I feel like I really want to be in my queen energy, and a lot of times that might be if I'm doing like some public speaking or I'm stepping into a meeting that's really important. I want to make sure that I'm going in there in an empowered energy. So before that, I might listen to music. I may meditate. Um, to kind of like remind myself of it. But another thing that I do is it really helps me in terms of managing my life because and when I mean that is that for me self-care is a part of queendom. And and so there are times where I may have to like clean up the house and I don't want to clean up the house. And one way that I will kind of motivate myself to do it is to say something like, a queen deserves a clean palace, right? Like, and that's
Ah,
a way of kind of like tricking myself into this idea of like, cleaning up this place is an act of self care, right? It's this home should reflect the queen that I am, right? And so that means,
yeah.
and believe it or not, because I've had friends say, "Does that actually work? Does that make you want to clean?" And I'm saying, "It does. It for me, it does actually work." When I think about, um, and I will, and I, for the sake of, I would say like in a very kind of like this is not befitting a queen to look for this room to look like this, and then that will give me the motivation to do it. And those things that are needed to care for myself, and this idea of I want the things in my life to reflect the inner the inner queen that I feel, right?
Right.
And if they don't, how do I make those align?
I love that. I love all those examples. I love the music example. I love kind of like, talking to yourself about is this how the queen would live?
Right, with
I
all
love that.
clothes everywhere. Um, and
Hmm.
and Glennon Doyle, who's a writer, she talks about the idea of integrity being that your inside and your outside match. And for me, that's kind of how I think of queendom is this idea of like, and by outside, that's like your relationships, that's your light, your external life. Is it a reflection of, are they in alignment with how you feel on
Right.
the inside? And that's kind of how I gauge my queendom is that, how closely am I like aligning
Yeah.
my life with my inner life?
Right. With your values and stuff like that. Um, wow, that's really great. I love that. So I feel like the queendom is not a new concept for you. Like it's part of your life.
It is new. I won't say it's new. It's. I feel like for us as women in this society, we've talked about this so often in a patriarchal society. I feel like it's a process of reclamation, right? I mean, it's something that is inherently ours, but then we live in this patriarchal world that kind of attempts to strip us of our power as women in various ways, politically and personally and spiritually. And so I do feel like for women, it is this kind of, and we've talked about this and we may discuss it, the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, right?
Yes.
But this idea of like, I feel like there's a lot of women I know who are around my age who are like kind of reclaiming this power and this queendom. So yes, I feel like it's inherently ours. I feel like it's always been mine to claim, but I feel like I've never claimed it the way that I'm claiming it today.
Yeah.
And you know, but I'm an older person, so that has taken some time to feel comfortable with owning and claiming that.
Well, I think that that's an important piece. Again, going back to this dichotomy between princess and queen, is there a certain amount of life experience that is required before you can claim queendom, or is that something that you can be born with? I don't know.
Either.
I don't know, but that's kind of what I was thinking about this morning because it feels as if like becoming a princess is the necessary prerequisite to becoming a queen.
Yeah,
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you can become one.
I think so. I mean, I associate queendom with a certain type of wisdom that you only get through experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But I love that concept of modeling that for your children too, so that one day when they are ready, or at least plants the seed at the very least, right, for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, and I do that, as an example for people in like small ways. Is that if my kids come home and they show me something, they ask me, "Am I proud?" I'll say I am proud, but then I'll ask them like, "But more importantly, are you proud of yourself?" Because that for me is like king or queendom is this idea of it's great if someone else is proud, but there's an inherent pride that I have in the things that I do. And, so it's like for me, I express my pride as a parent, but then I also want them to know that even as a parent, their pride in themselves, that's more important than whether I'm proud of them or not, which I
Mhm.
am. I do let them know like I am proud of you, but the more important question that you should always ask yourself is, are you proud of you? Because that's an empowered king queen stance for me
Yeah.
that I want them to embody. That I am not the standard, right? Or I'm not my approval doesn't trump their own approval of what they do.
Yeah.
Kind of just redirecting them back to their power is something, but it's that balance, right? Because it's like I've been, conditioned as a parent in this society, and I grew up, in a parental model where it was kind of like you do it as I say, and there were some elements of it that were very empowering, and some elements of my childhood that were disempowering. So it's just trying to like learn from those, and
Right. So a queen empowers others.
absolutely, I
Yeah.
think queendom to me is helping other people acknowledge and recognize the king and queen within them, right? As opposed to trying to rule over them. It's this idea
Right.
like I'm 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 holding my own queendom as an example of and as a way of like supporting you and recognizing your own queendom.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Beyonce popped into my mind again too. She's very good at that, modeling that for people.
Yeah.
So how are we oh my God, we're
Time.
at time. That went quick. Um, so I guess any closing thoughts on queendom?
It's just I would say that particularly for women who may be tuning in, again, I think it's really important for us to support the queendom in other women. Um, and to also recognize that that may look very different than your queendom, and that's okay. Like to me, that's the beauty of womanhood, that it comes in all shapes and sizes and expressions. But yeah, that's in a patriarchal society, women are often like pitted against each other, and um, so that's kind of my thing. Is like, own your queenship, but then also always be in support of another woman owning hers, even if it looks very different than yours. Um, and whether she's like your friend or not, right? Like I really am about women being who they are authentically, whatever that looks like for them.
Yes, I love that. Very empowering. Awesome. Well, I guess that's it. So I feel, bless you, I feel complete. I guess if I were to say a few last words, it would just be, just allow yourself to be playful when you're, discovering what your queendom is. That's what I allowed myself today. And as you can tell, I'm feeling very excited and empowered. So thank you again, Natasha. This has been fun and invigorating for me and really exciting. And I learned a lot today. Not that I usually don't, but I really came in really like, I don't know much about this. So I'm really excited to talk about it. So I want to encourage everybody who's watching to like this video and to leave a comment. We will respond to all of your comments, ask us questions, subscribe to the channel, and check us out every other Friday. So we come on here, Everyday Goddess, on the second and fourth Fridays of every month. Every once in a while, we might pop on at another time, but that is tried and true our Friday time and day.
So thank you, Annalisa.
Yeah.
Everybody, check out Journey to the Goddess TV, also the nadomacenter.com. We have some of our programming on there, and yeah, I'm always happy to be here. So thanks again.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Ciao.